The first thing you need to understand about betrayal is that it always comes wrapped in something beautiful. Mine came wrapped in Christmas morning, complete with a red bow, and the sound of my wife whispering sweet lies into her phone. I'm Eli Harper, and I make custom furniture for people who have more money than sense. 38 years old, calloused hands, and stupid enough to believe that 7 years of marriage meant something. I'd driven over early to my in-laws' mansion in Edina, one of those neighborhoods where the houses have names instead of just numbers, to surprise Jessica with her favorite coffee and croissants from that overpriced bakery she loves. The Whitmore estate sat on 2 acres of pristine snow, looking like something from a Christmas card. Charles and Margot Whitmore had built their fortune in commercial real estate, and they never let you forget it. The house was all stone and glass, with enough square footage to house a small village. I'd always felt like an intruder there, tracking sawdust on their marble floors. I used my key, still had one, though that was about to change, and slipped through the service entrance. The kitchen was empty, but I could hear Jessica's voice drifting from the sunroom. She was laughing, that musical sound that had first made me fall for her back in college. "Jake, we're about to be a family," she said, and my world tilted sideways. I froze in the hallway, coffee growing cold in my hands. Through the doorway, I could see her silhouette against the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to her ear, one hand resting on her stomach in a gesture I knew well. She'd done the same thing when we'd been trying for kids, back when we were still pretending our marriage was working. I know it's complicated, but Eli's been so distant lately. He won't even notice when I'm gone. Her voice carried that particular tone she used when she was manipulating someone. I'd heard it directed at clients, at her parents, at me. "The timing is perfect. I can file after New Year's, and we can start fresh." Jake, her boss at the marketing firm. Jake Granger, with his BMW and his corner office, and his habit of calling me sport whenever we met at company functions. I'd always suspected something was off about their relationship, but Jessica was smart, too smart to leave obvious clues. "Don't worry about the money," she continued. "Daddy's already said he'll help with the legal fees, and Eli's business is doing well enough that the settlement should be generous." I backed away slowly, muscle memory from years of moving quietly through my workshop, keeping my footsteps silent. The coffee and croissants went into the trash outside, and I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching my breath fog the windows. The smart thing would have been to drive straight to a lawyer. The reasonable thing would have been to confront her immediately. But I've never been accused of being either smart or reasonable. Instead, I went home and started making lists. By the time Jessica returned that evening, I had 3 pages of notes and a plan that would have impressed a military strategist. She bounced through the door like a teenager, cheeks flushed from the cold, carrying shopping bags from the kind of stores that don't display prices. "Honey, you missed such a wonderful morning," she said, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like lies. "Mom made her famous French toast, and we talked about vacation plans for next summer. I was thinking maybe Europe." "Sounds great," I said, not looking up from the chair I was repairing. "Just the 2 of us?" "Of course. Who else would we take?" I tested the joint I'd been gluing, applying pressure until it held. "I don't know. Maybe Jake from your office? You 2 seem to spend a lot of time together." She laughed, but there was a note of tension in it. "Jake? He's my boss, Eli. It's called work." "Right. Work." That night, she curled up against me in bed like she had for 7 years, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe. She'd always been a sound sleeper, confident in her ability to control her environment. It was one of the things I'd loved about her, that unshakable self-assurance. Now it was going to be her downfall. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The thing about being married to someone for 7 years is that you learn their patterns. Jessica kept her laptop password on a sticky note inside her jewelry box, the same place she'd kept her diary in college. She used the same 3 passwords for everything, cycling through them when forced to update. She backed up her phone to the cloud automatically, and she'd never bothered to change the shared Apple ID we'd set up when we first got married. I spent the next 3 days learning things about my wife that I wished I could unknow. The affair with Jake had been going on for 8 months. The pregnancy was real, but the timing meant it could be either mine or his. There were hotel receipts, restaurant charges, and text messages that would make a sailor blush. But the real surprise was Kyle Morrison from accounting. Apparently, Jessica believed in diversifying her portfolio. I was in my workshop, surrounded by evidence printed from her cloud account, when Mike Kowalski knocked on the door. Mike was my business partner, a former Marine who'd helped me build the shop from nothing after he got out of the service. He took one look at the papers scattered across my workbench and whistled low. "Jesus, Eli. She really did a number on you." 2 numbers, actually, Jake and Kyle. Mike picked up one of the photos, Jessica and Jake at some fancy restaurant downtown. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give her the Christmas she deserves. Please tell me you're not planning anything stupid." I looked up from the text message I'd been reading, one where Jessica described in detail what she wanted to do to Kyle after their next business meeting. "Mike, stupid would be pretending this isn't happening. Stupid would be letting her take half of everything I've built while she runs off with her boyfriend. Stupid would be raising another man's kid while she laughs about it with her friends." "So what's the plan?" I showed him the list I'd been working on. Mike read it twice, then started laughing. "You're going to ruin Christmas for everyone, aren't you?" "Deck the halls, Mike. Deck them all." The first phase was reconnaissance. Mrs. Klein, our neighbor, had always been suspicious of Jessica. She'd mentioned seeing strange cars in our driveway when I was at work, and she had one of those doorbell cameras that recorded everything. It took exactly 1 plate of Christmas cookies and a sob story about suspicious activity to get copies of 3 months' worth of footage. Jake's BMW had been in my driveway 14 times, Kyle's Honda 6 times. Sometimes they overlapped. Apparently, Jessica was even more ambitious than I'd given her credit for. Phase 2 required a trip to the electronics store and a conversation with a kid young enough to be my son who explained how GPS tracking apps worked. $50 later, I had everything I needed to monitor Jessica's movements in real time. Phase 3 was the most satisfying. Jake's car was parked outside an upscale bar downtown, the kind of place that charged $20 for a cocktail. I waited until the lot was empty, except for his BMW, then got to work. The Home Wrecker sticker went on his windshield, right in his line of sight. I let the air out of all 4 tires, not slashing them, nothing illegal, just inconvenient. Then I used a key to scratch cheat into the paint on his driver's side door. I was sitting in my truck across the street when he came out an hour later. The look on his face when he saw his car was worth every risk I'd taken. He stood there for 5 minutes, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling for roadside assistance. Then he kicked his own tire and nearly fell over. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Working late again, don't wait up." I texted back, "No problem, hope Jake's evening is going better than expected." She didn't respond. The beauty of a well-planned revenge is that your targets do most of the work themselves. Jessica's friend Sloane was the kind of person who collected secrets, like some people collect stamps. She worked at the same marketing firm, knew about both affairs, and had been helping Jessica cover her tracks for months. I found this out by reading their text messages, which were a masterclass in female manipulation. Sloane wasn't just enabling Jessica's affairs, she was actively encouraging them, probably living vicariously through her friends' adventures. That made her fair game. I chose the Lexington Bar on Grand Avenue for our confrontation. It was the kind of place where Sloane liked to hold court, surrounded by her circle of gossip-hungry friends. She was there every Thursday night, holding down the same corner booth, dissecting the lives of everyone she knew. I walked in at 8:30, wearing my best shirt and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Sloane was exactly where I expected her to be, regaling three other women with some story that involved a lot of hand gestures and dramatic pauses. "Eli," she called out when she saw me, her voice carrying across the bar. "What brings you to our little corner of paradise?" "Just thought I'd stop by and thank you," I said, sliding into the booth next to her. "Thank me? For what?" "For being such a good friend to Jessica, really going above and beyond." The other women at the table sensed something was off. One of them, I recognized her from Jessica's Instagram posts, started gathering her purse. "I don't know what you mean," Sloane said, but her smile was getting tighter. "Sure you do. The alibi texts, the fake girls' nights, the restaurant recommendations for her dates with Jake and Kyle." The temperature at the table dropped 20 degrees. Sloane's friends were staring now, and conversations at nearby tables were starting to quiet down. "Eli, I think you've been drinking." "Actually, I've been reading." I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd prepared. "Want to hear what you texted Jessica last Tuesday? Make sure you shower before you go home. You smell like Jake's cologne again." Sloane's face went white. "You can't. That's private." "Or how about this one from last month? Kyle's cute, but Jake has more money. Don't put all your eggs in one basket." I stood up, making sure my voice carried to the surrounding tables. "Ladies, meet Sloane Mitchell, professional homewrecker and part-time marriage counselor. She's been helping my wife cheat on me for 8 months. Any of you need relationship advice?" The silence that followed was beautiful. Sloane tried to say something, but nothing came out. Her friends were already sliding out of the booth, distancing themselves from the blast radius. "Oh, and Sloane, you might want to update your LinkedIn. I hear Jake's going to need a new assistant soon." I left her sitting there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. By the time I got to my truck, my phone was buzzing with notifications. The story would be all over their social circle by morning. Phase 4 was complete. Jessica was waiting for me when I got home, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Her phone was in her hand, and her face was flushed with anger. "What did you do to Sloane?" I thanked her for being such a good friend. "Why?" "She called me crying, said you humiliated her in public." "Did I?" "I just shared some of her helpful text messages with her friends. I thought they'd appreciate knowing what kind of person she really is." Jessica stepped closer, and for a moment I thought she might actually hit me. "You had no right." "I had no right?" The words came out louder than I'd intended. "I had no right to defend my marriage? To call out the people who've been helping you destroy it? I don't know what you think you know. I know about Jake. I know about Kyle. I know about the pregnancy and the lawyer and your daddy's money. I know about the hotel rooms and the fake business trips and every lie you've told me for the past 8 months. She went completely still. "Eli, the only thing I don't know is why. Was I really that bad a husband? Was our marriage really worth so little?" For just a moment, I saw something that might have been regret flicker across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold calculation I'd come to know so well. "You're right," she said. "It was worth nothing, just like you." That was when I knew there was no going back. Planning the perfect ambush is like crafting a flawless piece of furniture. Every joint must be precise, every angle measured, every stress point reinforced. I spent 2 days preparing what I privately called the Last Supper, though nobody was going to return unchanged afterward. The venue was Mancini's Char House, Jessica's favorite restaurant. Expensive, exclusive, and always packed with the kind of people who mattered in her social circle. I made 3 separate reservations under different names, all for the same evening, all strategically positioned around the main dining room. The guest list was simple: Jessica, Jake, and Sloane. Each thought they were coming for a different reason. Jessica believed I was ready to discuss reconciliation. Jake thought I wanted to negotiate a business deal. I dangled the possibility of custom furniture for his new office expansion. Sloane thought she was meeting Jessica for damage control after the bar incident. None of them knew the others would be there. Mike helped me set up the technical aspects. We'd tested the restaurant's Wi-Fi network the week before, and I'd prepared a USB drive with a simple presentation program. The kind of thing I used for client meetings, nothing fancy or illegal. Just photos, text messages, and audio recordings, all obtained from Jessica's own devices. "You sure about this?" Mike asked as we sat in his truck outside the restaurant. "Once you pull this trigger, there's no taking it back." "They already pulled the trigger, Mike. I'm just returning fire." Jessica arrived first, looking stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She'd always known how to make an entrance, how to command attention just by walking into a room. She chose a table near the center of the dining room where she could see and be seen. Jake came in 10 minutes later, scanning the room until he spotted me at the bar. He was wearing one of those suits that screamed money, probably Italian, definitely expensive. He walked over with the confident stride of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "Eli, good to see you. I have to say I was surprised by your call." "Life's full of surprises, Jake. Can I buy you a drink?" "Sure. Scotch, neat, top shelf." I ordered his drink and watched Jessica over his shoulder. She was checking her phone, probably wondering where I was. She hadn't noticed Jake yet. His back was to her table. "So, about this business proposal," Jake said, accepting his scotch. "I'm always interested in quality craftsmanship." "Oh, you'll get quality tonight. Guaranteed." Sloane arrived fashionably late, as always. She spotted Jessica immediately and hurried over, her face still showing the strain from our encounter at the bar. They hugged and started talking in urgent whispers. "Excuse me for a moment," I told Jake. "I need to check on our table." The hostess led us to a table with a perfect view of both Jessica and Sloane. Jake's confident expression flickered when he saw them, but he recovered quickly. "What's going on, Eli?" "Dinner, just like I promised." That's when I activated the presentation. The restaurant had multiple flat-screen TVs scattered throughout the dining room, usually showing sports or news. But their system was surprisingly easy to access if you knew what you were doing, and Mike's nephew had taught me a few things about wireless connectivity. The first image that appeared was innocent enough, a photo of Jessica and Jake at a restaurant downtown. They were holding hands across the table, looking into each other's eyes like lovers in a movie. The conversation in the dining room began to quiet as people noticed the screens. Jessica's face went white when she saw herself displayed for everyone to see. The second image was more explicit, a text message from Jessica to Jake discussing their hotel room preferences. The third was a photo of them kissing in his car. The fourth was a message to Kyle, describing what she planned to do to him after their next meeting. "Turn it off," Jake hissed, half rising from his chair. "It gets better," I said, pulling out my phone. "Wait until you hear the audio." Jessica's voice filled the restaurant, crystal clear through the sound system. "Eli's such an idiot. He actually thinks I'm working late. I could probably bring you home and do you in our bed and he'd never notice." Jake's response: "Maybe we should try that. I'd love to see the look on his face." The dining room had gone completely silent now. Every eye was on our little drama, and Jessica was the star of the show. She stood up so fast her chair fell over, but there was nowhere to run. The photos and messages kept cycling, each one more damaging than the last. "You bastard!" she screamed, pointing at me across the room. "You sick, twisted bastard!" "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, standing and raising my voice so everyone could hear, "I'd like you to meet my wife, Jessica Harper, and her boss, Jake Granger. They've been having an affair for 8 months, along with several other colleagues. Jessica is currently pregnant, though paternity is questionable." Jake finally snapped. He lunged across the table at me, but I was ready for him. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him into the dessert cart that a waiter was wheeling past our table. The crash was spectacular. Tiramisu and chocolate mousse went flying, covering Jake's expensive suit and several nearby diners. Mike appeared from nowhere, blocking Jake's path as he tried to get up. "I wouldn't, if I were you," he said quietly. "Lots of witnesses here." "This is harassment," Jake sputtered, wiping chocolate from his face. "I'll have you arrested." "For what? Showing people photos of you in public? Playing audio recordings made on my wife's phone? Everything here is perfectly legal, Jake, just like your affair, right?" Security was moving in now, but they weren't sure who to restrain. I was standing calmly by my table while Jake was covered in dessert and Jessica was screaming at anyone who would listen. "Check, but not mate," I said, looking directly at Jessica. "The game's not over yet." The beautiful thing about destroying someone's life is that they usually help you do it. Jessica spent the 3 days after the restaurant incident calling everyone she knew, trying to control the narrative. But social media is forever, and half the people at Mancini's had posted videos of the confrontation before she even left the building. Jake tried a different approach. He called me the next morning, alternating between threats and attempts at negotiation. He was worried about his business reputation, his client relationships, his carefully constructed image as a successful entrepreneur. "We can work this out, Eli, man to man." "I'm listening. What do you want? Money? A business contract? Name your price." "I want you to suffer the way you made me suffer. I want your clients to know what kind of man they're dealing with. I want your mother to see those photos of you groping my wife in a hotel lobby." The line went quiet for a long moment. "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake I made was trusting people who didn't deserve it." That afternoon, I got a call from my biggest client, Harrison Development. They were canceling a $50,000 contract, effective immediately. No explanation, just a terse email from their legal department citing moral concerns. Jake's handiwork, obviously. He was using his connections to destroy my business, just like he'd destroyed my marriage. Time for Phase 5. Mike and I spent the evening at his kitchen table, planning what he called Operation Garage Door. Jake lived in a converted warehouse in the North Loop, all exposed brick and industrial chic. The building had a parking garage with individual stalls for each unit, and Jake's BMW was always in the same spot. "Security cameras?" Mike asked. "2. But they're focused on the entrance and elevator. The parking stalls are in a blind spot." "Alarms?" "Just on the cars themselves, nothing on the garage doors." Mike grinned. "This is going to be fun." We went in at 3 in the morning when the building was quiet and the security guard was making his rounds on the upper floors. Jake's garage code was embarrassingly easy to figure out. It was his birthday, which Jessica had mentioned in one of her text messages. The BMW was pristine, as always. Jake was the kind of man who washed his car twice a week and treated it better than most people treat their children, which made what we did next particularly satisfying. We didn't damage anything permanently. That would have been illegal. Instead, we made his life inconvenient in ways that would take days to fix. Sardines under the seats, where the smell would linger for weeks. Flour in the air conditioning vents, so every time he turned on the heat, he'd get a face full of powder. Glitter bombs in the glove compartment and center console, because glitter is the herpes of craft supplies. Once you have it, you never get rid of it. The pièce de résistance was a custom wooden sign I'd made in my workshop. Family Destroyer, in elegant script, mounted on a piece of reclaimed oak. We hung it from his garage door opener right where he'd see it when he pulled in. We were cleaning up our tools when Mrs. Klein appeared in the garage doorway. She was wearing a bathrobe and slippers, and she should have been terrifying, a witness to our crime, ready to call the police. Instead, she winked. "That man's been nothing but trouble since he moved in," she said. "Always revving that engine at all hours, bringing different women home every week. It's about time someone taught him some manners." "Mrs. Klein, what are you doing here?" "I live in 4B. Couldn't sleep, so I came down to check my mail. Didn't see anything unusual, if anyone asks." She shuffled back toward the elevator, then turned around. Next time you boys want to have some fun, let me know. I've got some ideas about his motorcycle. Mike and I looked at each other and started laughing. Sometimes the universe provides exactly the allies you need. The next morning, I got a series of increasingly frantic text messages from Jake. The first was a photo of his car's interior, covered in flour and glitter. The second was just a string of profanity. The third was a threat to call the police. I texted back, "Sorry to hear about your car trouble. Maybe you should be more careful about where you park." Then I sent him a photo I'd been saving, Jessica and Kyle in Jake's own office, taken from security footage I'd obtained through a contact at their building's management company. The timestamp showed it was from 2 weeks ago, right around the time Jake thought he was Jessica's only side piece. My phone rang immediately. "You son of a—" "Language, Jake. Is that any way to talk about the mother of your maybe baby? What do you want?" "I want you to know that Jessica's been playing you the same way she played me. I want you to understand that you're not special, you're just convenient. And I want you to think about that every time you smell sardines in your car." I hung up and went back to work. I had a dining room set to finish, and revenge was exhausting. The final confrontation came, appropriately enough, at a New Year's Eve party in Jessica's parents' neighborhood. The Adena Community Center was hosting their annual celebration, and half the social elite of the Twin Cities would be there. It was exactly the kind of event where reputations were made and destroyed, where gossip became currency and appearances mattered more than truth. Jessica would be there. She never missed a chance to network with her parents' wealthy friends. Jake would probably show up too, still trying to salvage his business relationships, and I would be there to finish what I'd started. Mike tried to talk me out of it. "You've already won, Eli. They're both finished in this town. Why risk it?" "Because winning isn't enough. I want them to know they lost." I spent the afternoon preparing my final surprise. It was simple, elegant, and completely legal, just like everything else I'd done. A presentation folder for each of the major players in Jessica's social circle, containing printed copies of the most damaging photos and messages. No commentary needed, just the facts laid out in chronological order. The community center was decorated like a winter wonderland, all white lights and silver streamers. The crowd was exactly what I'd expected: successful people in expensive clothes, drinking champagne and pretending to care about each other's lives. Jessica was holding court near the bar, surrounded by a smaller group than usual. Word of the restaurant incident had spread, and some of her fair-weather friends were keeping their distance. She was wearing a red dress that hugged her still flat stomach, playing the role of the wronged wife with practiced ease. "Eli's been having some kind of breakdown," I heard her say as I approached. "I think the stress of his business problems finally got to him. I'm just trying to be supportive." "That's very generous of you," said Margaret Chen, the wife of a prominent lawyer. "Not many women would stand by their husband during a mental health crisis." "Well, we made vows," Jessica replied, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "For better or worse, right?" "Speaking of vows," I said, stepping into their circle, "I brought some photos from our wedding. Would you like to see them?" Jessica's face went white, but she was trapped by the social situation. Refusing to look at wedding photos would seem strange to her audience. I opened the first presentation folder and handed it to Margaret. "This one's from our honeymoon. Jessica looks so happy, doesn't she?" The photo was actually from Jessica and Jake's weekend in Duluth, taken just 2 months ago. Margaret studied it for a moment, then looked confused. "I thought you honeymooned in Colorado." "We did. This is from a more recent trip. Jessica's been taking a lot of business trips lately." I handed out the other folders to the remaining women in the group. Each one contained a carefully curated selection of evidence, organized like a legal brief. Photos, text messages, hotel receipts, GPS data showing Jessica's movements. "What is this?" asked another woman, flipping through her folder. "It's a timeline of my wife's extracurricular activities. I thought her friends should know what kind of person they're supporting." Jessica tried to grab one of the folders, but Margaret held it away from her. "Jessica, Is this real? It's fake. He's been stalking me, harassing my friends, trying to destroy my reputation because I asked for a divorce. The metadata on the photos says otherwise, I replied calmly. Everything's been verified by a digital forensics expert. Chain of custody, authentication, the works. It would hold up in court. That's when Jake appeared, pushing through the crowd with the desperate energy of a drowning man. His face was flushed, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was falling apart. Eli, we need to talk, now. We're having a conversation here, Jake. Feel free to join us. I was just showing everyone the photos from your business trips with my wife. Jake grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away from the group. You don't understand. This has to stop. Why? Are you worried about your reputation? Your business relationships? Your mother finding out what kind of man raised? My mother already knows. His voice cracked. She saw the videos online. She's in the hospital, heart attack. The stress. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been guilt. Then I remembered Jessica's voice on that Christmas morning, talking about starting a new family while destroying mine. I'm sorry to hear that, Jake. Maybe you should have thought about consequences before you decided to wreck my marriage. Please, I'll do anything. Pay you, leave town, whatever you want. The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the drama. Jessica was crying now, real tears for once, probably realizing that her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. What I want, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, is for people to know the truth. I want them to understand what you and my wife did to me, to my marriage, to my life. I want consequences. Jake lunged at me then, desperation overriding common sense. But I was ready for him. I stepped aside, letting his momentum carry him into a table full of champagne glasses. The crash was spectacular, and Jake went down hard, covered in broken glass and expensive alcohol. Security was moving in, but the damage was already done. Half the party had their phones out, recording everything. By morning, the videos would be everywhere. Jessica was sobbing now, surrounded by women who were looking at her with disgust and fascination. Her parents appeared from across the room, their faces showing the kind of horror that comes from watching your daughter's reputation explode in public. You destroyed everything, she screamed at me. Everything I worked for, everything I built. You ruined my life. No, Jessica, you ruined your life. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I walked away then, leaving the chaos behind me. Mike was waiting by the exit, shaking his head but smiling. Feel better? He asked. Actually, yeah, I do. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white. It was almost midnight, almost a new year. Time for new beginnings, new possibilities, but not for Jessica, not for Jake, not for any of them. They'd made their choices, and now they got to live with the consequences. As for me, I had a business to rebuild and a life to restart. The old Eli was gone, burned away in the fire of betrayal and revenge. The new one was just getting started. I walked to my truck through the falling snow, listening to the sounds of celebration and destruction behind me. Fireworks were going off somewhere in the distance, welcoming the new year with explosions of light and sound. It seemed appropriate. Sometimes you have to burn everything down before you can build something better. Christmas lights out indeed.